Viral debrief.
Sink rate. Sink rate.
Good. Some little more.
50. 40.
Okay.
30. 20. Good.
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel, 7-4 Gear, is all about aviation. Several of these videos got sent to me by a lot of you, so I just want to thank all of you in the 7-4 crew for sending me all these videos. Honestly, without your help, there's no way I could keep this series going. If you have a video that you think would be good for this series or you want to see in this series, just send it to my Instagram. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, be careful. Don't worry.
Bank angle.
Right angle check.
Bank angle.
Yeah.
Sink rate. Pull up. Pull up. Sink rate. Sink rate.
Immediate careful. Good. Some little more.
50. 40.
Okay.
30. 20. Good.
Wow, I mean, where do you even start with something like that? There's going to be some things that you probably noticed, but maybe some things that you didn't notice. So let me show you this. See this right here? This PKYGW, I think it says. That means that the plane is actually registered in Pakistan. Now there are two terms that the plane started screaming at the pilots that you never want to hear if you're a passenger in the back. One of them was sink rate and the other one was bank angle. I'm going to play it again so you can hear what I'm talking about.
Bank angle.
Right angle check.
Bank angle.
Yeah.
Sink rate.
Bank angle basically means the plane is leaning too far to the left or to the right. So it's kind of the safety protocol or the safety net that's set in place where if the plane banks over too far to the left or banks too far to the right, the plane yells at you and tells you you're going too far. So that's what bank angle means. You'll never normally ever hear that, especially when you're landing, you should never be hearing that. And the other thing is sink rate. Now sink rate sometimes, in very, very rare cases, there are some airports that sink rate is something that the plane will call out. There are some very rare airports where that's going on, but sink rate basically means that your descent rate that you're coming towards the ground is too fast. It means the plane is coming into the ground too quickly. So when your plane yells sink rate to you, usually you have to add power, and you heard that guy say add power or power. That usually means if you add power, that slows down your rate of descent. Now my guess is here, based on the terrain around this airport, that this is not one of those airports where you would hear sink rate as you're coming in to land. Something else that you may have noticed was that the pilot on the right-hand side, where you're actually seeing kind of more of him, the pilot that's in the right there has 4 bars. Typically, the pilot that's sitting up there that's on the right-hand side is wearing 3 bars, like me. That makes him a first officer. He has 4 bars. Typically, what that's going to mean in this situation here is that that's a check airman. So he's a specially qualified captain who's going to train other pilots, and in this case, it would be another captain that's sitting in the left-hand seat. So my guess is that it's a new captain sitting in the left-hand seat, and this is a check airman that's sitting in the right-hand seat. So you see these 4 bars right here? That means that he's a captain, and because he's sitting in the right-hand seat, I'm guessing that it just means that he's actually doing some training for the captain who's in the left-hand seat. You also notice that right after this very hard landing, his cell phone is out, which honestly is really surprising. After a landing like that, you would not be typically thinking, I need to get my phone out right away. That really surprised me. Now you've seen a lot of hard landings in this viral debrief series. I've had my own share of very hard landings, but that's actually not what concerns me most about this video. A lot of people think that being a pilot means you're flying the plane really well and you're making really smooth landings and really smooth takeoffs, and they think that that's really what a pilot is. But really, the most important thing about, especially when you're a captain, the most important thing is making decisions and making good decisions. And this whole video has lots and lots of really poor decisions. The way the plane is going back and forth while it's trying to line up with the runway, that's bad. The rate that it's descending towards the ground, that's also really bad. And all those bad flying skills are actually easier to fix, even though these are terrible. They're actually easier to fix than the most important thing here, and that's the terrible decision to try to land. The truth is, one of the most important things about being a pilot is how well do you make decisions, and how well do you make safe decisions. And a lot of times you have to make those safe decisions on very short notice, and you have to make a split-second decision of what you're going to do in this situation. So really, the inability to fly here and the fact that he is all over the place, that's terrible. That's terrible piloting. I'm surprised that the other pilot let that go on, and then there's a third pilot, I'm guessing, who's recording, and he's not saying anything. That really blows my mind that none of them said go around or said anything. They just kind of let this all play out. But here is the thing. All that bad piloting, that can be fixed a lot better than someone who's going to make that terrible decision in that situation to say, yeah, we're going to put it in there. That's the worst decision, because if the person's continually making those types of bad decisions, they're going to get themselves in trouble sooner or later. The bad piloting, you can teach somebody to fly. Maybe not this guy. If he's been flying around for this long and he's still doing these types of things, I don't know how he's gotten that far, but that is less of a concern, and more of the concern is that they saw all this and thought, yeah, no, we're going to make it fit. I have in simulators, and you've seen in some of my flight sim games, I've done it, but in real life, almost, if you had a bank angle as you're turning into approach, every pilot that I know, that's who will go around. If you had something like a sink rate, unless it was previously talked about ahead of time, where this airport for the terrain situation, you might hear sink rate. In any other situation, sink rate, we're going around. And just how far he was over to the side of the runway as they were coming into touch, they weren't like lined up with the runway at the very end, which again, in a simulator, I have tried different crazy things, but in real life, you would never be coming over the runway, getting ready to touch down, but sliding from one side to get over the runway. You would never do that in real life, or you should never do that in real life because it's not safe. A lot of people sent me this clip, and so the biggest takeaway from this isn't really the bad flying itself, it's the terrible decision making to try to land when they really should have gone around. Ooh. Typically when you're taxiing a plane, which means what you're doing when you're driving the plane on the ground, we call it taxiing. When you're driving that plane on the ground, there's a painted line with a little yellow line that's painted all over the airport. You may have seen them. And that line is what you want to have your nose tire on. You want your nose tire on that line, and that will keep you away from hitting other planes or lamp poles or things like that. This is actually what that line looks like from the flight deck. When we're looking down at the line, this is what it looks like. And you just want to keep your nose tire on that line there. Now I can't tell from this footage because it's really grainy, but it doesn't look like there's a painted line out there anywhere. So in some airports you have a ramp area, which is uncontrolled, meaning air traffic control isn't telling you what way to move or anything like that, and then you just have to get your plane safely out of there. So when there is nothing that's painted out there, then it's your responsibility to get it out. And the other thing to know is that even if there is a painted line and you still hit something, there's two ways to look at this. One, if your nose is on the yellow line and you hit something, it's going to be a lot easier to explain to you, Chief Pilot, how it all happened. But if your nose is not on the center line when you hit something, it's going to be a lot harder to explain. Either way, when we're taxiing and our nose is on the center line, we have pretty long wings, over 200 feet long. So when our nose is on the center line, usually if we're passing something that we think might be close, we'll have the other pilot look out the window to make sure, hey, we're going to be fine, we're not going to hit it. Because even if your nose is on the line and you hit something, well, one, you're not flying anywhere, and two, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. But it's better to have your nose on the line and hit something than your nose not on the line, and I don't think there was a line. So they should have been looking out that window to make sure that there was nothing out there, and it was the middle of the day, so you would think that they would see a lamppost out there. If you ever do something like this, and hopefully you don't, but if you ever do something like this, it's going to be on your permanent record. You're probably going to get drug tested, and it's going to be a very expensive mistake. I don't think the pilot would get fired, but everybody would know his name after this. You probably noticed that the tug stopped, there was a guy on the ground that threw his arms up in the air, all that stuff, and that's because everybody would have heard that wing hit that light pole so hard that it knocked it over and actually threw a thing off of the light pole. I mean, they hit it pretty hard. To recap, even if your nose is on the line, you're responsible. If your nose is not on the line, you're still responsible. You're responsible as soon as that plane starts moving. The other thing to consider is that these possibly weren't pilots. Sometimes you'll have trained maintenance personnel or people that are trained in actually moving planes around on a ramp. I don't think anybody would have noticed that and thought their wing was going to clear. I think they probably just didn't even see it out there. So that's another possible scenario that these weren't even pilots at all and they didn't even see it. And that happens. People make mistakes. That's just a part of life.
Concord Tower, Cessna 117 Tango Sierra. I'm identing. I'm losing my engine.
Who says having engine trouble?
Cessna 117 Tango Sierra. I'm sputtering in and out and losing power. I've pulled carb heat. Everything else is in the green. Looks like my oil pressure has dropped.
All right, well, you can proceed direct to the runway 117 Tango Sierra, clear to land, and I'm ready for you.
Okay, it's coming back and I'm losing it, and I'm over a residential area. I don't have a lot of places here. I have pitched for altitude.
Okay, roger that.
This video also got sent to me a lot. And there's something that the pilot did here which was really smart, and that was what he started transmitting here.
I'm sputtering in and out and losing power. I pulled carb heat. Everything else is in the green. Looks like my oil pressure has dropped.
There's a few things that were going on here, and I suspect that he was talking more out of nerves than anything else, but it was actually really smart. Here's why. One, he's transmitting to tower what's going on, and it's allowing him to kind of hear what he's doing and possibly catch something that he's doing. He's kind of talking aloud, right? So that's good. But the other thing is that there might be other pilots that are listening to that frequency, and they may have an idea of something else that he can do. So he's transmitting, I'm suspecting, out of nerves. He's making that transmission, but it's possible that another pilot hears what's going on and says, hey, do this, or pull your carb heat, or whatever. Gives another idea or suggestion. Maybe they've flown that plane. Maybe they had a similar problem on that plane. Who knows? But it actually works out to his advantage by transmitting that to air traffic control. Now, air traffic control can't really do much in this situation here, but so far it looks like he's doing a really good job handling this engine as it's starting to fail on him because he's looking for a place to land. He's realizing he's too far away. So far he's doing a good job. Let's see what's next.
I have lost full engine power. I have no engine.
Roger, no engine. We got guys coming to you. I got Charlotte notified, and they're coming to you. 117 Tango Sierra.
Roger. I'm looking for a field here. I'm going to try to drop in.
Roger that.
I wanted to pause it here real quick because there's something that he put on the screen, and I don't know if the guy who made this video is the same person that is flying in this, but there's something that put up on the screen that I just want to show you real quick. In this situation, the pilot is trading his altitude for speed, but you notice here that they put this keeping an eye on the altitude right here. So this pilot is doing a really good job. He's looking for a place to land, he's circling, he's aware of his overall situation being too far away to try to make it from the airport, and he also knows that he's over a residential area, so he doesn't want to keep going closer to the airport and then get jammed up and possibly crash into a bunch of houses, because that's never going to end well. So he's made this correct determination, too far away, he's not going to make it, so now look for a place to land, and that's what he starts doing. So he's doing everything correctly. But one thing that he did is that he put up there keeping an eye on the altitude. Now the reality is that your altitude here is not that important. You can look out the window and see roughly how high you are, and in a small plane like this you can circle around in a pretty small range and stay pretty tight on an area. The most important thing here is really that the airspeed stays at a certain speed. If you get the plane too slow, you can take it into what's known as a stall. If you stall a plane, the easiest way I can explain it is there's not enough air coming over the wings, and if you get too slow, the plane will actually nose over and will have to pick up speed really quickly to get back up and create enough lift. And what happens is you'll lose a lot of altitude really fast. So in truth, the more important part here is keeping an eye on the airspeed, and that can happen. You get nervous, you're worried about trying to stay up longer, and you keep up at that higher altitude, and then you stall the plane, lose a bunch of altitude, and now you've put yourself into a really small corner of what your options are as far as landing. He was really doing a very good job keeping the speed up and turning around to keep an eye on where to go to land, but he just put up that thing about the altitude, or somebody put up the thing about the altitude. So I just wanted to let you know, if you're ever in this situation, really one of the most important things to do is keep an eye on that speed and make sure that you have your speed up, because if you stall, you're going to be in a lot more trouble. Another thing that I really like about this clip is something the controller said. Listen to this.
Roger, no engine. We got guys coming to you. I got Charlotte notified, and they're coming to you. 117 Tango Sierra.
Like I said earlier, there isn't a lot that the controller can do here, but he is talking with this guy and making him feel like he's not alone. The truth is, if you're flying a single engine plane and you lose your only engine, you're going to feel very alone. And understandably so, I'd probably feel the same way even with all of my experience. So by him talking out the problem, the controller letting him know, I have people coming, it feels like there's somebody on his team. And you've heard me talk about air traffic control is there to help you, and that's what's happening here. This guy is remaining calm, this controller is remaining calm, letting him know, hey, I got people coming to you, don't worry. He's letting him feel comfortable having someone else to talk to, because he's probably feeling very, very lonely at this point. So the controller's doing a really good job, and it's a really good example. Even though the controller can't do anything for him, he's being a teammate for him, giving him as much support as he possibly can, and using all of his available resources to help him out. One of the great things about being an airline pilot is you have a situation like this. I mean, you're never going to have a situation where you've lost your only engine. You might have a silly situation, but that's kind of like a 1 in a trillion situation. But In most emergencies that you will ever encounter as an airline pilot, you have another pilot there, and they're your teammate to help you out. And in some cases, like when I'm flying, a lot of times I'll have 3 or 4 people. And I'll tell you what, having that third and that fourth person makes all the difference in the world, because you can get task saturated, meaning you have a lot going on. You'll have one pilot working the radios and flying the plane. You'll have another pilot who's trying to resolve the problem. And when you have a third or fourth pilot up there, it makes a huge difference, because now you have a guy who's kind of sitting back and seeing everything that's going on. They call it sitting in the smart seat, because when you're sitting back there, you can see both pilots, everything that's going on, you can see the whole picture, and so they call it sitting in the smart seat. And it's kind of interesting because I've been in that seat, that third seat, when things have gone sideways, and now I'm seeing things and saying to the captain, no this, or to the first officer, no this, and I'm seeing things and I have a better perspective. And that's one of the really important parts of crew resource management and working as a team. Now, this pilot doesn't have that, but he's using air traffic control as his teammate to help him, and that teammate is helping him get the police department and fire department and all the other people organized to get over there to him. So far, this pilot has done a really good job getting everything situated, communicating with air traffic control, keeping an eye on his airspeed and altitude, and finding a place to go land. But he's done everything right so far, but none of it matters unless he does the last part and lands the plane well. So let's see how that goes.
I'm going to attempt a landing in a field right now.
117 Tango Sierra, Roger. I notified Charlotte. They got people sending as soon as they can to you.
I have touchdown. Holy sh**.
Well, this is a little embarrassing for me. This is a grass field that he's landing on, and I imagine it's full of bumps and holes, and his landing looks smoother than most of the landings that I made as I went through flight school, which was on a paved runway designed for landing. One of the nice things about flying these smaller planes, even though you have one engine, is that if you do lose an engine, you can land in a lot of areas. And that's what he did here. He had the situation where he wasn't going to make it to the airport, and he put it down on a grass parking area. I don't know what they were using that lot for, but either way, it looked very, very smooth, and smoother than most of my landings when I went through flight school. It's amazing what you do when you're super hyper focused, and I don't know what his flight experience was, but he did a great job. Now, there are 2 points I want to show you here. One thing that he did very well, and one thing that would be something to consider if you are ever in this situation you probably want to do different to prevent a problem. Look at this. What I like here is that even though his adrenaline is probably at full throttle, pun intended, he didn't stomp on the brakes. And that is the right move here. Because when you have this grass here, if you were to stomp on the brakes, you could shove your nose wheel into the grass or the dirt or the mud or whatever it is. And by not stomping on the brakes, you're keeping the weight off the nose. So that's the thing that he did really well. And this other thing is something that would be good to consider if you are ever in this situation. Notice as soon as he touches down here, he doesn't really have a lot of back pressure on the yoke, which is this thing right here. Normally you'd want to keep that thing back, so that way if there is any pothole or mud or anything like that that's on the nose, your nose doesn't get stuck into the dirt and possibly flip your aircraft over, and now you've taken a really great landing and made it terrible. There was a similar landing that I did on a Viral Debrief, I don't know, a few months ago, where they landed in a field. And the pilot did a great job. The landing wasn't as smooth, I don't know what the ground was like, but the landing wasn't as smooth as this, but they did a great job keeping the nose pressure pulled back, keeping that yoke to their chest, and that relieved that nose pressure. So at the end of the day, I always judge everything based off the results. The results here were, man, I would be happy 100% with that. And it was great because he's got it on video, so he shows just how calm he is under pressure. So he did a great job. But if you're ever in this situation, something to keep in mind, you want to keep a little bit of pressure off of that nose just in case it doesn't grab into the dirt or the mud or anything like that. If you do hit a bump and you have back pressure, what it's going to do is help your plane go over that. The mains are going to take that pressure and not the nose. Just something to consider. Otherwise, sir, you remained extremely calm and you did a very good job. You should be really proud of yourself.
Esa la pueden cerrar ustedes mismos con la llave, Tatiana.
Okay, this job was not nearly done as well as the previous video. Something you never want to see when you're taxiing your plane to park is a bunch of people running away from your aircraft. A bunch of people running away usually means you're about to be in danger or you're doing something stupid. Neither of the two are good situations. I mentioned before that when you're coming into park, you want to be going at a pretty slow speed. And the reason is they're trying to get you to park on a pretty small spot. So if you're going too fast, there's a high chance that you go and roll past that spot. You don't want to be going too fast for that reason. The other reason is there is a lot of stuff that's around there. People, boxes, whatever, who knows what. And if you're going really fast, it's possible that someone's maybe walking backwards or walking around or trips or whatever. If you're going really slow, you can stomp on the brakes and you're not going to be moving and going over them. If you're going really fast, as in this situation here, you could possibly end up running over somebody or sucking them in your engine. So when you're in a ramp area, usually what I try to do is stay under 5 knots. So it's just a couple miles an hour. You don't want to be going too fast. And as you get closer and closer to the parking, usually I'm trying to stay under 2 knots. And that way I can get it as close to being on the spot as I could possibly be. You notice here as they're coming in, they're going pretty quickly. And then you start seeing all these people running away. You never want to see any of those types of things when you're coming in to park. A trick that I learned at the regionals for this particular situation is how you can taxi in and park your aircraft without anybody noticing. The thing is, sometimes pilots will keep their power in and then they'll come in and stomp on the brakes and everybody in the back of the plane gets thrown forward. It's not really a good experience, right? But if you're trying to be as smooth as you could possibly be when you land and as smooth as you could possibly be when you come in and park, this is what I would do in this situation. These regional jets typically don't have enough thrust that when you're at idle that they're going to move your plane forward. Which means to move forward, you've got to add power, and there's this big run up, so then those engines rev up, then you move forward a few feet, then you got to stomp on the brakes, and it's kind of jarring for everybody in the back. But if you leave the power in, what's going to happen is the plane's going to be pushing you forward. Then you use your brakes as actually your way to slow you down. So if the plane is already being pushed forward, it's going to use your brakes to slow you down, and then that's going to help you stop a lot smoother. The other trick is the last few feet, instead of using both brakes, if you use just one brake, it's a smoother stop than if you use both brakes at the same time. This is a trick that I learned. Well, it worked for me. You can try it. Let me know how it works for you. If you want to see some more pilots making mistakes while they're flying, check out this video here. And if you want to see some pilots fighting with air traffic control, check out this video up here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.